talking about paleontological evidences. Paleontology means the study of fossils. So homologous structures means the anatomy is same but morphology and function is different in this particular case. So what does homology mean? Anatomically they are similar but morphological and their function is different. So analogous organs means their function is similar but their structure, morphology and anatomy is quite very different. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to this session for class 12 biology. I am Dr. Divya, biology faculty. So in this session of chapter 6, that is evolution, we shall learn about the different evidences that are there to support the theory of evolution. So talking about evidences. So in the previous session of this chapter, we had learned how various scientists proposed their theory towards evolution. So those theories are not sufficient and people require evidences to prove or to know exactly how evolution happened on this planet. So for that, different evidences has been given. In this session, we will learn about paleontological evidences, embryological evidences, anatomical and morphological evidences, biochemical evidences, breeding evidences and anthropogenic evidences. So let's learn about each one of these one by one. So talking about paleontological evidences. Paleontology means the study of fossils. So what are fossils? Fossils are nothing but different life forms that are found in the rocks. And those life forms can be in the form of prints or they can be the bones that are there, the prints of the bones and all that of the dead organisms. So rocks from sediments and a cross section of the earth's crust indicates the arrangement of sediments one over the other during the long history of the earth. So what does the sentence means? Say for example, we had learnt about dinosaurs and they have given that dinosaurs lived on this planet some million years ago. They have given a number, right? So how exactly did they get to know which was the dinosaur era and all that, right? So for that, fossils are one of the main evidences there. So how do they get to know? So what they do is rocks usually, because fossils are nothing but the remains of these dead organisms in between the rocks. And we know that how rocks are formed. Rocks are formed because of the sediments that get settled over a period of time. So once one layer of sediment of sand gets settled, on that another layer, on that another. So these sediments that get settled layer by layer every year, they eventually form a rock. So counting the number of sediment layers that are there in the rock. So once we cut the rock, we can get the fossil print inside. Then we need to see how many layers of sediments have settled. Say for example, if 10 layers of sediments are there, maybe they can say that this fossil is 10 years old. Or if there are 1,000 layers, they can say that this fossil is 1,000 years old. So it is like that, like how in a tree trunk, by counting the annular rings in the tree trunk, we can say how old the tree is. Similarly here, counting the layer of sediments on the rock or sediments formed or deposited on the rock, we can say how many years old the fossil is. And that is one of the evidences for evolution. And different aged rock sediments contain fossils of different life forms who probably died during the formation of the particular sediment. So say for example, they have died and on that sediments have been formed. So counting the number of sediment layer, we can say that how old the dinosaur was or how old a particular pteridophyte was or a plant species was. So like that. So some of them appear similar to modern organisms. They represent extinct organisms, for example dinosaurs. So that is how, because of these paleontological evidences or evidences through fossils, we got to know that our planet earlier, that is before the humans came into this planet, it was ruled by these dinosaurs. So paleontological evidences are very, very important. And we also know like how did the dinosaurs, how evolution of the dinosaurs took place. Say for example, Tyrannosaurus, they evolved from Brachiosaurus. So that is how, based on paleontological evidence, they could get to know based on the morphological or anatomical similarities that these organisms share. it is said that from Archaeopteryx the birds would have evolved, or from Archaeopteryx the crocodilians, then from the crocodilians the pteranodon, and from the pteranodon the birds might have evolved, the present day birds. So all these theories have been put forth based on the paleontological evidences. So moving further, a study of fossils in different sedimentary layers indicates the geographical period or geological period in which they existed. As I said, based on the top of the fossil, how many layers of sediments have been settled, based on that we can find to exactly which geological period these fossils or these organisms were there. And the study shows that life forms varies over time, and certain life forms are restricted to certain geological time span. That is true, right? Do we have dinosaurs and all that now? No. They belong to some particular geological lifespan and now they have become extinct. But still we got to know that they ruled this earth during that particular time. How? That is again based on the sediments that have settled on their fossils. Hence, new life forms have arisen at different times in the history of the earth, and all this is called as paleontological evidence. So, paleontological evidence eventually tells us which particular organism ruling this planet during which period or during which geological period, and how the present day organisms have evolved from them, because looking at, say for example, here we have the structure of the dinosaur, that is the fossil of the dinosaur. By looking at their anatomy, don't you think that they represent the present day crocodiles that are there? They represent the present day reptiles, almost all the reptiles, right? So this is how we get to know that maybe they have evolved from these particular organisms. So paleontological evidences helps us to understand what organisms were ruling the earlier earth, and also how the present day organisms evolved from which particular organism that was ruling the earlier earth. So all that evidences we can get through paleontology. Next, talking about embryological evidence, that is looking at the embryo, we can find out how did the organisms evolve on this planet. So this particular credit for embryological evidence goes to Ernest von Baer. So Ernest von Baer, he started observing the embryos of the vertebrates. So when he was observing the embryos of the vertebrates, he found that there was something in the embryos of the vertebrates which those vertebrates they lost when they became adults. So what was that? So he noticed that in these embryos of all the vertebrates, including humans, because we also come under the chordates, right, the vertebrates, we have a row of vestigial gill slits just behind the head. So those gill slits which are functional during the embryonic stage for proper breathing and all that, right? But later on, as the baby is delivered, those vestigial gill slits that are there, it is not found. Why it is not found? Because our nose and respiratory system are very well developed. We don't need that extra gill slits behind our head, right? So that is lost. So that actually he got to know while looking into the embryos of the vertebrates, and it is present only in the fishes. Why in the fishes? Because fishes are adapted to live in water, and fishes do not have nostrils to breathe. They need to depend on the gill slits for breathing. So that is why. And however, this proposal was disapproved on careful study performed by Carl Ernst von Baer. Usually embryological evidences was considered during a certain era. After that, they found that these evidences are not enough to prove evolution, the theory of evolution. So therefore, they dropped using embryological evidences as a proof to explain the process of evolution on this planet. So this is about embryological evidences. So what did they get to know? They got to know that evolution happens in the vertebrates in different organisms, wherein in the embryo of those particular organisms, they have gill slits behind their head for proper respiration, but they are lost, especially in the vertebrates. They are vestigial because they are lost when those embryos of the vertebrates, they become adult. So this is about embryological evidence. So moving further, we'll learn about anatomical and morphological evidences. So some of the organisms, they have a similar anatomy and structure, but they might perform different functions. So that is what we will look into. So they show similarities and differences among organisms of today and those that existed years ago. Yes, when we look at those organisms, say for example, there is many differences that are there from the present day organisms that we see today with that of the earlier organisms that existed on the planet. But still, when we look at their morphology and anatomy, there is some regions where they have quite similarity in the morphology and the anatomy. So such similarities can be interpreted to understand whether common ancestors were shared or not. That is, say for example, how did they get to know that we evolved from the monkeys? Because we have some of the characteristics which are similar to the monkeys, right? So that is how they try to prove it. Or say for example, dinosaurs have some characteristics, or the present day reptiles that are there like the crocodiles and all that, they have some of the characteristics which are similar to few of the dinosaurs. So maybe those reptiles might have evolved from the dinosaurs. So therefore, anatomical and morphological evidences give an idea exactly from which particular organisms did the present day organisms evolve. So for anatomical and morphological evidences, let's take the example of the forelimbs. That is the forelimbs of whales, bats, cheetah and humans. To look at the forelimbs of whales, bats, cheetahs and humans, it is different. And the function of these forelimbs in these organisms are also totally different. But when we look at their anatomy, that is the arrangement of the bones and the bone structure, it is quite similar. So this is one of the best examples wherein we can say that anatomically, that is, they are related to one another because anatomically the structure is same of the forelimbs, it is same, but morphology and function is different. Say for example, the forelimbs in these organisms, they perform different functions. In whales, they use it for swimming. In the case of cheetah, they use it for running, walking, etc. In the case of humans, our forelimbs, that is, I'm talking about the hands or the arm, we use it for clasping onto things, for eating and all that, for writing and all that, right? And in the case of bats, they use it for flying. So anatomically, they are similar. How they are similar? They have same bones, that is humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals and phalanges, that is fingers, everything they have. So if you can see here, man also has humerus, radius, ulna, metacarpal, carpal and phalanges, everything is there. Even in the case of cheetah also, they have humerus, radius, ulna, carpal, metacarpal and phalanges. In the case of whale also, they have humerus, radius, ulna, carpal, metacarpal and phalanges, right? Even in the bats also, they have humerus, radius, ulna, carpal, metacarpal and phalanges. It's there. So anatomically it is similar. So maybe these organisms, they might have evolved from each other. That also we can say. So therefore anatomically they are similar, but their morphology and structure is quite very different. Hence in these animals, the same structure developed along different directions due to adaptations to different needs. So why did they have a different morphology though they had the same anatomical structure? Why? Because whales live in water. Can they have limbs like the humans? No, they need flippers to swim. So depending on the habitat in which these organisms are living and depending on the mode of locomotion, their morphology of their forelimbs have varied, but still anatomically they are similar. So these are the things that anatomical and morphological evidences proves the theory of evolution. So this is called as divergent evolution and these structures are homologous. So homologous structures means the anatomy is same but morphology and function is different in this particular case, and homology indicates common ancestry. So therefore these organisms might be one or the other way interrelated to one another. So that is what anatomical and morphological evidences prove. So this was homologous organs which we considered for an evidence. So next, talking about the anatomical and morphological evidences, we'll take the example of plants. So earlier in the previous slide we took the example of animals, that is forelimbs of the animals. Here we'll consider the plants. So in plants also, the thorn and the tendrils of bougainvillea and cucurbita, they represent homology. So what does homology mean? Anatomically, they are similar, but morphological and their function is different, right? So here, thorn, if we take the section of the thorn and the tendril to look at the cells, they are quite very similar. And the place of origin is also similar. That is, they arise from the axis of the petiole of the leaf, right? But thorn, look at the structure of the thorn, how it is, and look at the morphology of the tendril. It is different. And the function is also different. Thorns, they help the plant in defense, that is to protect itself from the birds, from the insects that come to feed on them, right? And the tendrils, they help the plant to climb or to hold on to something for support. So function is also different. So this says that maybe Cucurbitaceae and Bougainvillea members might be relatives. Why? Because the anatomy of these two structures are similar, but only thing is their morphology and function is different. So they might be relatives. So these are the evidences which anatomical and morphological evidences offer us to prove the theory of evolution. So moving further, we'll take the analogous organs. So analogous organs means their function is similar, but their structure, morphology and anatomy is quite very different. So talking about the wings of the butterfly and wings of the birds, we'll look into. So if we take the wings of the butterfly and the wings of the bird, almost they're similar to look like, but anatomically they are completely different. But they perform similar functions. So remember, for analogous organs as evidences and homologous organs as evidences, homologous organs means the organs are morphologically, they are different, function is also different, but anatomy is same. Analogous organs means morphology is same, function is same, but anatomy is completely different. So hence analogous structures are a result of convergent evolution. So for divergent evolution, we can consider homologous organs as an example, and for convergent evolution, we shall consider analogous organs as an example, because different structures evolving for the same function and hence having similarity. They are converging. Different structures are converging or coming together and they are performing the same function, though they are anatomically different. So it is a convergent evolution. Divergent means same anatomical structures. Anatomy is same, but they are performing different functions. They are diversifying that particular organ or particular part of the body of an organism is diversifying or becoming different to look at to perform different functions having the same anatomy. That is divergent evolution, wherein we took homologous organs as an example. For convergent evolution, wherein similar organisms, that is different organisms, they have their structure similar and that structure performs the same function though they are anatomically different. So that is an example wherein analogous organs, we have taken the example for convergent evolution. So talking about different examples to prove convergent evolution, the eye of octopus and mammals. So if you look at the eye of the octopus and mammals, their function is similar, that is to see, but anatomically they are quite very different. And the flippers of penguins and dolphins. So penguins and dolphins, if you can see, their flippers morphologically they are similar to look and their function is also same. They help them to swim, right? But their anatomy is completely different. Next, similar habitats has resulted in selection of similar adaptive features in different groups of organisms but towards the same function. Their different habitats, in the case of divergent evolution wherein we took homologous organs as an example, their different organisms, they adapt in different environmental condition and therefore they have their organs or parts of their body which are anatomically similar but morphologically different to perform different functions suited to that particular habitat in which they want to live. In this particular case, their function is similar because where their habitat, the habitat of penguin is water, they swim in water, whales also swim in water, dolphins also swim in water. So therefore the main function of the flippers is to just swim. So if they have to swim anatomically, but they are different, but their function is similar, but morphology is same but anatomy is different. Next, talking about one more example, we can take the example of the modifications, that is the stem modification of potato and sweet potato. So potato and sweet potato, anatomically they are different, but their function is the same, that is they act as storage structures for starch and glucose, that is especially starch, right? So these are the anatomical and morphological evidences wherein we took homologous organs as an example for divergent evolution and analogous organ as an example for convergent evolution. So next, let's learn about biochemical evidences. So similarity in proteins and genes. Biochemical means the chemical components present inside the body of the organism, and the organisms are completely made up of proteins, and these proteins are produced by genes itself. So similarities in proteins and genes performing a given function among diverse organisms gives clues to common ancestry. And these biochemical similarities point to the same shared ancestry as structural similarities among diverse organisms. Say for example, we and the monkeys, we share some genes which are similar. So, and therefore we have some of the proteins produced in a body exactly similar to those of the monkeys. So that might be an evidence to prove that we might have evolved from the monkey. So these are biochemical evidences. Next, talking about breeding evidences. So man has bred selected plants and animals for agriculture, horticulture, sports, of security. Man has also domesticated many wild animals and crops. So this intensive breeding programs created new breeds that differ from the other breeds. So in breeds, be it plant or animals, we have the wild varieties, that is the original ones. But man, he is not satisfied, or we are not satisfied with what we have. Like say for example, we need crops that give us very good yield in a very short time. So can we still depend on the wild varieties of crops there? No. They go in for breeding, wherein they do tissue culture, they go in for genetically modified crops and all that, so that we get a good yield and a good income also. So therefore, from where did these genetically modified crops or the present day crops would have arose, right? We would have got it from the wild variety itself. So wild variety is the ancestor for all these crops. So therefore, breeding is also one of the evidences for evolution. Or say for example, dogs. Now we have n number of dog breeds were there, but earlier the original dog breeds, that say for example, we have the dingo, that is the street dogs that you find everywhere. So the other dogs breeds that are there, it might have evolved from the dingoes itself because of breeding programs and all that, right? So therefore, breeding evidences also to a larger extent supports the theory of evolution. So moving further, we can learn the anthropogenic effects of evolution. So evolution of a particular organism can occur because of, not just because of breeding, because artificially we breed the organisms by introducing artificial insemination, wherein from the wild varieties, or genetic techniques wherein from the wild varieties we can get new varieties of plants and animals. But apart from that, even human activities, that is anthropogenic activities, or the pollution that we create, the chemical fertilizers that we add to the crops, all these can also result in evolution. For that, we have taken the example of the peppered moth, that is the white-winged moth and the dark-winged moth. So this is an example for melanism. So what happened was, before the industrialization happened, there was no much pollution in the atmosphere. So there are two types of moth varieties. One is the white-winged moth and the black-winged moth. This picture shows about before industrialization, and this picture shows after industrialization. So before industrialization, the background of the tree trunk. So this is the tree trunk on which the moths used to rest. So if you see the background, it is where the background is light. So it is very difficult to spot the white moth, but the brown colored moth could be spotted very well. So therefore, the predators used to feed on the brown moth, and the white moth, because it was not that spotted, it could be camouflaged in the tree background. Their population increased, and drastically the brown winged moth's population came to a decline. That is before industrialization. After industrialization, what happens? A lot of factories and all that, they started releasing soot or black smoke into the atmosphere. So that soot or black smoke, it started settling on those trees. Now when these moths go to rest on the trees, which is having a dark background. Why is that dark background? It is because of So the dark background is actually because of the soot or the industrial smoke that settled on the tree. Now when the background is dark, which moth gets spotted quite easily? It is the white moth, right? And the brown moth got camouflaged in the dark background. So therefore, the population of the brown moth increased and the population of white moth decreased, because the white moths were easily seen by the predators and they were devoured by the predators on a larger scale. This is how anthropogenic activities has a major role on evolution. So this is the theory which is very, very important in exam point of view also, which proves that how anthropogenic activities or human activities such as polluting the environment and all that can cause the decline of the population of a particular species and increase in the population of a particular species depending on the conditions. So these are the evidences that are there. So with this, the session comes to an end. So we learned the different evidences that proves the theory of evolution. So in the next coming session, we shall learn about adaptive radiation and we shall learn about biological evolution, taking some examples. So I hope you understood this session well. We shall meet again in the coming session with these two topics. So see you in the coming session. Thank you.